This video is sponsored by the Call of Duty League. I've said it many a times and I'll continue to say it. A lot of Warzone is a mental game, even outside of just 1v1 gunfights. Outthinking your opponents or having some sort of better approach to a gunfight in terms of angling, mobility, and any number of things can absolutely produce a much better outcome for you in your favor. So today's tips, we're going to be focusing on that, a combination of things that you just may not even think about, but also some things that can help you out in certain engagements. These are the things that pros at the highest level of Warzone know about and incorporate into their games daily, so why shouldn't you? Starting out, let's jump into some things that you may not actively consider, some things that maybe you heard about here and there, but you should absolutely use in any situation that you can. Number one, the first one that always gets me, and one that I see not enough people doing or even potentially knowing about, is that of using a tactical to cancel your gas mask animation. This is something that if I could have $1 for every clip that I saw where the gas mask animation got somebody killed in a gunfight, I'd be rich. And I'm sure that this has happened to you plenty of times. I know that it's happened to me plenty of times. There's a very simple way to end up doing this. All you have to do is, before the gas touches you and that animation initiates, hold your tactical, whether that be a heartbeat sensor in which you can just pull that out, or if it's something like a stun or a flash grenade. All you have to do is hold that, do not let go and throw it, then your gas mask will come over automatically, and then once it's closed, that animation is canceled. You can jump right into a gunfight. Now, sure, that might not help you in an immediate gunfight if you're fighting with somebody on the fringe of the gas, but for what I would say a large majority of those situations are, it helps out greatly. Plus, you can get some nice little flanks going if necessary without having to deal with that pesky animation. The next tip I want to talk about is a little bit of a no-brainer, but more so hone in on some of these things. Utilizing your environment with jump spots, high ground, and things like that is absolutely massive. For jump spots, we actually recently covered this in a full-on guide here, talking about a ton of them, but for a brief recap here at this, there's plenty around Verdansk, and I mean basically every building you could do something with. But some of the more pesky ones, things like those two-story restaurants, you can get on those from the outside. Most of them situated around the map. You can scale something and make a little bit of a strafe jump to get onto the outside. From there, you can enter in from the second story, where most people will be caught off guard because they're usually only focused on that staircase. The double white buildings, those have a couple of jump ups. Firstly, a lot of them have a main entrance shelf right above the doorway where you can actually jump up onto that from an AC unit, and then from there look into the second story. There also is the back window entrance where you can jump onto the AC unit on the back of the building where there are no side entrances, but you can jump up that second story window with a little bit of a strafe jump and again catch people off guard. Those two-story tin buildings, well, you can make a lot of strafe jumps on there to get some cover. Those yellow two stories, you can take a couple of jump spots from different windows up to the shelf above the doorways to catch people off guard, and a lot of those wooden houses have jump ups as well, utilizing that sort of awning or shelf above the doorway. High ground, that's something that's really self-explanatory again, but you never want to actively put yourself in an open area or area where you have to fight with lesser cover, especially when looking up and when looking in the east at the sun, because Verdansk 84 has some incredible lens flare when it comes to that global lighting. You'd think Michael Bay made the sun or something like that. But when it comes to situating yourself, make sure you get that high ground. If you can, rotate around and get a more advantageous position rather than being at the bottom of a hill or mountain or something like that. Other fun facts in terms of this positioning, things like those catwalks and those three-story tin buildings, you actually can't shoot through those. So if you're getting shot by somebody on the ground level, go prone, heal up, and then you can take them out when jumping back up while healed, or potentially bait them long enough that your teammates can come get the cleanup. Number 3, use fully loaded here if you need to drop in on a loadout later on in the game. Now, while that in and of itself is probably a tip that's been well known for quite some time, what not many people realize is this also applies then to Black Ops Cold War weaponry as well. With a lot of the meta, I'd say probably a good bit of Warzone right now is all playable weapons. Probably about 20 to 25 weapons that are viable in certain situations, but there's a large percentage of those that are Cold War weapons, and with no fully loaded perk available, or any weapon perk available for that matter, it's hard to drop in on a loadout late game and have the necessary ammo for a gunfight. But especially now when the double rifle meta is a thing, there's quite a few combinations you can do here where you can have a dedicated loadout that will allow you to get ammunition that then extends to your Cold War weapons as well. Things like your CR-56 AMAX, you toss that on with fully loaded, you can end up having an overkill class with an XM4 or an AK-47, and you're good to go on that ammo as well. Same thing with something like maybe an M4A1 with fully loaded for an FFAR class, something that gives you more ammo and incorporates multiple weapons into the fold. Definitely consider that next time late game and have that as a sort of contingency or backup plan. Next up, I want to talk about auto tac sprint. Now this one, again, is a very easy one, but not many people still use it by comparison to the player count. Auto attack sprint takes a bit of time to get used to, but if you like to play aggressive, or in most cases that it's used for, like to slide cancel to keep that speed up or perhaps break cameras, this is incredible for you because you don't need to button mash your left thumbstick. Just for the fact of being able to save your thumbsticks, honestly, I think it's worth it. Those slide canceling benefits and such are just bonuses after that. Another thing that not many people realize is that parachuting, you can actually get a further distance by doing it slightly different. If you end up jumping out of the C-130 to start, or jumping from a higher location to somewhere else, there's only a certain amount of distance you can get from perfectly cutting your chute and gliding. But if you end up turning sideways and parachuting sideways, you actually end up getting more distance out of that specific drop path than you would if you were going normally. So take that into consideration next time you have to make a stretch rotation to another location in the map. The final thing we'll talk about, and things you may not actively consider, is try to use your shouldering and snaking to get as much peeker's advantage as possible. For this, you can end up popping in and out of corners to end up seeing players around that corner before they'll be able to see you, or as accurately as they'll be able to see you. That peeker's advantage is something that has been around in Call of Duty for a long time, so take advantage of that where you have the opportunity to. Now, the next stuff we'll talk about is really things that comes down to strategy, but before we jump into that second part here of this video, I want to take a few seconds to talk about the Call of Duty League, the ones bringing you this video here today. It's home to some of the most fierce competitors in competition in COD history. The League, with 12 franchise teams, is approaching Major 4 currently, lasting all weekend into the weekend. The storylines have been wild this year, with the switch to 4v4 play making for some interesting roster moves all year round, bringing some prominent names up to play, while others are forced to sit out. With the Atlanta phase looking to go back-to-back, they've got some fierce competition in the Subliners and Toronto Ultra, but there's also still plenty of waves that could be made. You can't count out Optic Chicago, the Mutineers, the Thieves, or the Empire just yet, and this week is bound to provide plenty of action. One thing that I'm incredibly excited to see is the stakes of a major play out on some new locale like Standoff that was introduced during Stage 4 to competitive play. That to me is going to be a huge blast from the past for sure. We saw some action on it during the Stage 4 home series circuit, sure, but not with so much on the line. For those that are just picking up on the action right now, with Stage 4 happening this weekend, that means we're getting closer and closer to the grand finale later this summer. COD Champs. With 5 stages on the season, each with their own home series that culminate in a major, the playoffs are in sight. So that means that every single hardpoint, control, and search match is absolutely massive at this time. Now more than ever, the tension and excitement is building because each and every move now counts as playoff seeding can ultimately be secured. You don't want to miss a thing, so if you're interested in any of the action, make sure you check the link in the description below in order to catch it all. A big thanks once again to the CDL for sponsoring this video. But let's talk strategy. The final couple of things I want to talk about here today end up dealing with things that can just alter your approach to certain situations. One of the biggest ones that I see underutilized all the time is calling your loadouts actually inside in certain buildings. A lot of the times, players will just call their loadouts in the open, and that's a recipe for disaster. You have no cover outside of that loadout drop, which is assuming that your entire team picks it up. That then despawns and goes away, so therefore no cover. Call your loadouts inside a building that you're around, preferably on the top story that you can, so that you can actually grab this through the roof. This is something that gives you cover from all areas, minus maybe say some windows that could be in the building, but it is way more advantageous and keeps you way safer, especially if you know there's a team around you or somewhat closing in on you. It is way more helpful than just calling it out in the middle of a street, open field, or somewhere with not as much cover. Absolutely make sure you do that. Next up, talking about loadout drops once again, you can actually utilize your loadout drop twice, and this is something that is really helpful if your teammates, at least one of them, are cool with the loadout they end up getting initially. A lot of times, players will end up buying that loadout drop once they get the initial 10,000 they have so they can get in the action, but once you get down to 15 seconds before the end of Zone 1 closing in, and then I believe 45 seconds before Zone 5 closes in, you actually get a free loadout drop spawning from the world. Now, if that's the case, again, if a player is satisfied with the loadout they have already, they can actually leave that go and not pick it up. So therefore, if you end up dying even after you pick up that second loadout, you then have the opportunity to dive back onto it and get that loadout once again from the same loadout because it did not despawn. You're able to pick that up once per life, so therefore once you die and come back from the gulag, you can hit it again, and theoretically you can do it again if you're bought back. Make sure you're communicating with your teammates that if somebody is satisfied, let them set up your team for a regain if necessary. Another big thing, talking about communicating with your team, one big thing that can really help you out is if you end up killing a player with a satchel, don't just go and walk over the loot of the enemy that you just killed, because oftentimes you'll end up picking up extra armor plates. One smart thing that can really help you and your team is that somebody takes that armor satchel, but then doesn't take the plates associated with it, because once you end up getting that armor satchel, you're granted a full set of 8 armor pieces, but what's on the ground is what was dropped as that extra within the inventory. So there's up to 8 plates available for players to pick up as well. So you can then maximize the armor sharing off of that. You just need to make sure you're conscious of it. Then finally, the last thing we'll talk about in terms of strategy and approaching situations, one thing that I often do with my team is that if we see somebody, say, getting a recon contract complete, we'll actually hold off on taking them out, because if you didn't know this, once they complete that contract, they of course get more money, but the more money they get, they also drop whenever they die. So while they won't drop the full amount of cash they had on their person once you kill them, you'll get a larger yield out of that once they complete the contract rather than killing them during the completion of said contract. Same thing goes with something like a scavenger chest or a bounty if you really want to get to it. Also, one thing that is really advantageous is that if you know somebody's going to be getting a loadout from the buy station, you can let them buy it, kill them, and they'll drop that loadout marker that you can end up picking up and getting a free loadout for your team. So make sure you're just paying attention to those situations and when you can pounce on them versus when maybe you should hold off. So that said, that is 10 tips here that the pros incorporate into their play every single day. So why shouldn't you be able to as well? That's where we're going to wrap it up though. Hope this helped you out in some way, shape, or form. Hopefully it proved insightful. Let me know your thoughts down below. Are there any tips you're going to use here in your upcoming games? Anything you learned here that you particularly like? Whatever it is, feel free to let me know your thoughts. But once again, a big thank you to the Call of Duty League for sponsoring this video and series. Make sure you check out all the Major 4 action, and of course, get in on the action for yourself. By linking your Activision account to YouTube, you can earn exclusive calling cards, emblems, and other items just for simply watching the major championship matches. So if you don't want to miss out on either those rewards or the action, make sure you check the link in the description below. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure you drop a like down below, and of course, if you're new to the channel, make sure you guys subscribe so you don't miss a single thing regarding all things Warzone and anything COD related. We'll keep you up to date with all of them. If you also want to follow me over on Twitter and Instagram, those are the best places to get content on YouTube. Practice on both those. If you guys want to strike up a conversation, ask me a question, whatever it may be, that link is down there in the description below. That said, thanks so much for watching. My name is Espresso. I'll see you guys later. Take care and peace.